Of all the faces that danced across the silver screen in the golden age of musicals, some are frozen in time, forever young, forever joyful. We see them, and we are instantly transported to a world of sweeping landscapes and soaring melodies. And in that beloved cinematic family, the Von Trapps, there was one particular face, a mischievous girl with bright eyes and a rebellious spark. The one who put a pine cone on Fraulein Maria's chair, Louisa. We all remember her. But the woman who brought her to life, Heather Menzies, lived a story far more complex, more heartbreaking, and ultimately more profound than any Hollywood script could ever imagine. Her life wasn't a fairy tale set to music. It was a testament to love, a quiet battle against unimaginable loss, and a journey of finding a purpose that had nothing to do with the spotlight. Most of us know the girl on the mountaintop, but very few know the woman who had to navigate the valleys below. What happens when the music stops, the cameras turn away, and a life has to be lived in the quiet, challenging reality of the everyday? This is the story of the strength you never saw, behind the smile you'll never forget. To understand Heather's story, you have to picture the world she stepped into. It was the early 1960s, a moment perched precariously between the wholesome optimism of the post-war era and the seismic cultural shifts that were about to rock the world. Hollywood was still a land of giants, ruled by the last vestiges of the old studio system. Family-friendly musicals were king, enormous Technicolor spectacles that offered audiences an escape into a world where problems could be solved with a song. It was into this environment that a film called The Sound of Music was born. It was a gamble, a big, expensive, and unabashedly sentimental production in an increasingly cynical world. Heather Menzies herself was a product of this transitional time. Born in Toronto, Canada in 1949, she wasn't from a long line of Hollywood royalty. Her parents were artists, Scottish immigrants, who moved their family to the United States, eventually settling in the sun-drenched landscape of Southern California. She was enrolled in the Hollywood High School, and blessed with a natural talent and poised demeanor, she began to dip her toes into the world of acting. A few small television roles, like a spot on the popular series My Three Sons, began to build her resume. But she was just one of thousands of bright-eyed hopefuls looking for that one role, that one shot that could change everything. Little did she know that role would not only change her life, but would also etch her image into the cultural consciousness of generations to come. She was just a teenager, on the cusp of adulthood, about to be swept up in a phenomenon that no one, not even the film's creators, could have ever predicted. The casting call for The Sound of Music was one of the most exhaustive in Hollywood history. Director Robert Wise was determined to find 7 children who not only looked like they could be siblings, but who also possessed distinct, vibrant personalities. For the role of the third eldest Von Trapp child, Louisa, they needed someone with a twinkle in their eye. Louisa was the prankster, the clever one who tested the boundaries of every new governess. When 14-year-old Heather Menzies walked in, they found her. She had the look, but more importantly, she had the spirit. The shoot itself split between the sound stages of 20th Century Fox and the breathtaking vistas of Salzburg, Austria, became a formative experience for the young cast. For many of them, it was a magical extended summer camp. They became a true family, a bond that would, remarkably, last for the rest of their lives. Heather, being one of the older children, naturally fell into a protective role. She and Nicholas Hammond, who played Friedrich, were the resident teenagers, navigating the awkward space between being children and young adults on a massive film set. There were countless moments of levity. They famously played pranks on the stoic Christopher Plummer, who, despite his initial aloofness towards the project, he affectionately called the sound of mucus, eventually warmed to his on-screen children. Yet, the work was grueling. Long hours, intricate choreography, and the pressure of performing opposite a star as luminous as Julie Andrews demanded a professionalism beyond their years. One of the most famous and harrowing behind-the-scenes stories involved the iconic boat scene where Maria and the children capsize into the lake. Kim Carath, the 5-year-old playing Gretel, couldn't swim. The initial plan was for Heather to be the one to rescue her after the boat tipped, but the scene went awry. The boat overturned in such a way that Heather was thrown to the opposite side, unable to reach Kim as planned. For a few terrifying moments, the little girl went under the water, swallowing a great deal, before she was pulled to safety by an assistant director. Heather was reportedly shaken by the incident for years, a stark reminder of the real-world stakes that existed even in this fairy tale production. When The Sound of Music was released in 1965, it became more than a hit. It became a cultural event. It shattered box office records, won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and its soundtrack was a staple in households around the world. For Heather and the other 6 children, life was never the same. They were suddenly among the most recognizable faces on the planet. But this fame was a gilded cage. For Heather Menzies, she was no longer just an actress. She was Louisa von Trapp. It was a label that brought incredible opportunities, but also profound challenges. How do you grow up when the world wants you to stay a mischievous 13-year-old forever? This became the central conflict of her professional life. As the 60s ended and the world changed, Heather was determined to prove that she was more than just a girl in a dirndl, singing about dough, a deer. The transition from beloved child star to working adult actor is one of the most treacherous paths in Hollywood. For every Jodie Foster or Ron Howard, there are countless others who fade into obscurity or succumb to the pressures of early fame. Heather Menzies was a fighter. She was determined to build a career on her own terms, to shed the pristine, wholesome image of Louisa von Trapp and explore more complex adult roles. The 1970s saw her working steadily, becoming a familiar face on television screens across America. She appeared in popular shows like Bonanza, The Love Boat, and SWAT, showcasing her versatility. She was no longer just the prankster. She was playing wives, girlfriends, and characters caught in dramatic, often dangerous situations. She also ventured into a genre that was a world away from the rolling hills of Austria, science fiction and horror. She starred in the cult classic B-movie She's, a horror film about a man who turns people into snakes, and the schlocky but entertaining Piranha, directed by Joe Dante. Perhaps her most significant post-Louisa role was as Jessica Six in the short-lived but fondly remembered television series Logan's Run, based on the popular sci-fi film. She took over the role from actress Jenny Agutter, playing a fugitive in a dystopian future where life ends at 30. It was a role that required a blend of strength and vulnerability, a far cry from singing about favorite things. But even with a consistent stream of work, the shadow of The Sound of Music loomed large. It was in this context that Heather made a decision that shocked the public and became, for a time, a defining controversy of her career. In 1973, she agreed to pose for a nude pictorial in Playboy magazine. The spread was titled Tender Trap, a provocative and deliberate play on her famous past. The backlash from some quarters was immediate. How could Louisa, the sweet Von Trapp girl, do something so adult, so scandalous? For many, it felt like a betrayal of a cherished childhood memory. But for Heather, the decision was a calculated act of professional liberation. In interviews, she was unflinching. The Sound of Music was a brilliant, wonderful, fantastic movie that will be around for a long time, she explained years later, but the image is a killer. She felt trapped, typecast, and believed the Playboy shoot was the most dramatic way to sever the tie, to force the industry and the public to see her as a woman, not a girl. She once remarked that, by the standards of the day, her pictorial was rather tame, almost G-rated, compared to what else was being published. It was less about titillation and more about a declaration of independence. It was a bold, risky move, and while it didn't completely erase the Louisa image, it certainly complicated it, forcing people to acknowledge that the girl from Salzburg had indeed grown up. In the midst of building her career and redefining her public image, life intervened in the most unexpected and beautiful way. In the late 1970s, Heather was cast in a television commercial for Libby's corned beef hash. The commercial was set to the tune of Good Morning from St. John in the Rain. Her co-star was a charismatic, handsome, up-and-coming actor named Robert Urich. Urich was the epitome of the leading man, tall, athletic, with a kind smile and an easygoing charm. He was on the brink of stardom, soon to become a household name with roles in shows like Vegas and Spencer for Hire. From their very first meeting on that commercial set, there was an undeniable chemistry. It wasn't a dramatic Hollywood-style romance, but something deeper, more genuine. They connected over their shared experiences in the industry, their values, and their vision for a life that was grounded and real. Away from the glitz and glamour, they married in 1975, and what followed was, by all accounts, one of Hollywood's most enduring and authentic love stories. They consciously built a life away from the Hollywood party scene, focusing on family. They adopted 3 children, Ryan, Emily, and Allison, and created a home filled with warmth, laughter, and a profound sense of normalcy. For Heather, this was the role she cherished most. While she continued to act sporadically, her priority was her husband and her children. She was Robert's rock, the anchor in his often turbulent world of fame. He, in turn, adored her. In interviews, he often spoke of her with a deep, abiding affection, calling her his best friend and the center of his universe. Theirs was a partnership built on mutual respect and unwavering support. Friends described them as a team, navigating the pressures of their careers and the joys of parenthood together. A rarely told but revealing anecdote speaks to the depth of their bond. In the early days of their marriage, when Urich's career was taking off, he was often away on location for long stretches. Heather, who understood the demands of the business better than anyone, would pack up the kids and travel with him whenever possible. She created a sense of home for them no matter where they were, ensuring their family unit remained the priority. It was this quiet, steadfast devotion that defined their relationship. It wasn't for the cameras. It was the real, unscripted fabric of their lives. For Heather, the woman who had spent her youth in a fantastical cinematic family, her greatest joy was in creating a real one of her own. But the greatest test of that bond, and the challenge that would redefine the rest of her life, was just around the corner. In the summer of 1996, the idyllic world that Heather Menzies and Robert Urich had so carefully built was shattered. While filming a series in a remote location, Robert noticed a painful lump on his body. After a series of tests, the diagnosis came back: synovial cell sarcoma, a rare and aggressive form of cancer that attacks the body's soft tissues. The news was devastating. From that moment on, Heather's life transformed. She ceased to be just an actress or a wife. She became a caregiver, a researcher, a medical advocate, and the emotional bedrock for her entire family. She threw herself into understanding the disease, poring over medical journals, speaking with specialists, and exploring every possible treatment option, from conventional chemotherapy to alternative therapies. She was Robert's constant companion, attending every appointment, sitting by his side through grueling treatment sessions, and managing the complex logistics of his care. This period revealed a strength in Heather that few had ever seen. The quiet grace she possessed was now forged into a steely resolve. She managed the household, cared for their 3 teenage children, and provided a shield of normalcy for them, all while privately confronting the terrifying possibility of losing her husband. Robert, for his part, chose to fight his battle publicly, becoming a powerful voice for cancer awareness. But it was Heather who was the general in his private war. She was the one who managed his medications, who held him during his darkest moments of pain and despair, and who consistently infused him with the hope and courage to keep fighting. One of the most poignant testaments to her role during this time came from Robert himself. He often told people that he couldn't have gotten through a single day without her. He spoke of how she would stay up all night researching treatments, and how her unwavering belief in his recovery was the fuel that kept him going. Their love story, once a private joy, became an inspiring public testament to partnership in the face of adversity. For nearly 6 years, they fought the cancer together. There were periods of remission, moments of hope where it seemed they had beaten the disease. They celebrated these victories, cherishing every moment of normalcy they could reclaim. But the cancer was relentless. It would recede only to return, each time more aggressively. In the spring of 2002, after a courageous and fiercely fought battle, Robert Urich passed away, with Heather by his side. He was only 55 years old. The loss was immeasurable. The man who had been her partner, her best friend, and the center of her world for over a quarter of a century was gone. The silence in their home was deafening. For many, a loss of this magnitude would be utterly paralyzing. And for a time, Heather was consumed by grief. But the same resilience that had defined her entire life, the drive that pushed her to forge an identity beyond Louisa, the strength that saw her through her husband's brutal illness, would once again rise to the surface. Her life's third act was about to begin, an act born from tragedy but dedicated to hope. In the wake of Robert's death, Heather Menzies Urich could have retreated from the public eye, choosing a life of quiet remembrance. No one would have blamed her, but that was not her way. The 6-year battle she had waged alongside her husband had opened her eyes to the desperate needs of cancer patients and their families, particularly those dealing with rare cancers like sarcoma. She had seen firsthand the gaps in research, the lack of funding, and the sense of isolation that patients often felt. Her grief, as profound as it was, slowly crystallized into a new powerful purpose. She established the Robert Urich Foundation for Sarcoma Research. This wasn't a vanity project or a token gesture. It became her life's work. Heather poured her energy, her resources, and her entire being into the foundation. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was on the front lines. She lobbied members of Congress for increased funding for cancer research. She personally answered emails and calls from patients and their families, offering them the same compassion and practical advice she had learned through her own painful experience. The foundation's mission was twofold: to fund critical research aimed at finding a cure for sarcoma, and to provide direct support and comfort to patients. Heather understood the importance of human connection during treatment. The foundation created and distributed Robert Urich's Courage, a program that provided comfort items, art supplies, and journals to cancer patients to help them cope with the emotional and physical toll of chemotherapy. She wanted to give people the tools to navigate their fear and maintain their dignity, just as Robert had. Her work gave her story a significance that transcended her Hollywood career. The girl from The Sound of Music had become a formidable and respected patient advocate. The love story that had been her private joy became the fuel for her public mission. She used her platform not to seek attention for herself, but to shine a light on a cause that was deeply personal. She attended medical conferences, spoke at fundraising galas, and tirelessly worked to ensure that her husband's name and his fight would not be forgotten. Throughout this time, she maintained her deep connection with her Sound of Music family. The 7 actors who played the Von Trapp children remained incredibly close over the decades, supporting each other through marriages, births, and losses. Their bond was a genuine and lasting one. They were there for her when Robert died, and she was there for them in their own times of need. It was a beautiful, full-circle continuation of the family they had first formed on a film set in Austria so many years ago. Her legacy, she was now proving, was not just about the art she had created, but about the love she had given and the good she was putting into the world. She had turned the deepest pain of her life into a beacon of hope for thousands of others. Life has a way of coming full circle with a poignant and sometimes cruel symmetry. After dedicating more than a decade of her life to fighting cancer in her husband's name, Heather Menzies received her own devastating diagnosis in late 2017. It was glioblastoma, an aggressive and incurable form of brain cancer. The irony was heartbreaking. The woman who had fought so valiantly for others now faced her own final battle. Her decline was rapid, but she faced it with the same quiet dignity and grace that had characterized her entire life. She was surrounded by her children, the family that she and Robert had built with so much love. They cared for her, just as she had cared for their father. On Christmas Eve of 2017, just 4 weeks after her diagnosis, Heather passed away. She was 68 years old. The news of her death was met with an outpouring of grief, not only from her fans, but from all those she had touched through her advocacy work. Her Sound of Music co-stars shared beautiful tributes, remembering her as the fun-loving free spirit of their on-set family, and as the strong, compassionate woman she had become. Looking back, the story of Heather Menzies is a quiet epic. It's a journey that begins in the brightest glare of the global spotlight and ends in the profound, intimate space of family and purpose. We remember her as Louisa, the girl with the mischievous smile, frozen in the amber of a perfect cinematic moment. But her true legacy is far richer. She was a woman who navigated the treacherous waters of child stardom and emerged with her integrity intact. She was an actress who boldly sought to define herself on her own terms, refusing to be confined by a single iconic role. But most importantly, she was a wife whose love and devotion were the bedrock of one of Hollywood's great romances, and a mother who built a family grounded in real-world values. When faced with an unimaginable tragedy, she did not crumble. She transformed her pain into a powerful force for good, creating a legacy of compassion and hope that has touched countless lives. Her story teaches us that the roles we play on screen are fleeting, but the love we give, the battles we fight for others, and the grace with which we face our own mortality are what truly define us. Heather Menzies lived a life of quiet strength, profound love, and unwavering resilience. The music may have stopped, but her echo, one of courage and compassion, will endure for a very long time to come.